Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and bring our meeting to order. We're going to our city council workshop for tonight. Ms. James, would you go ahead and please call the roll of the council?
Yes. The Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Linda J. Davis.
Present.
The Honorable James Whitmore. The Honorable Hattie Portis Jones.
Present.
The Honorable Ulysses J. Smallwood.
Present.
The Honorable Pat Palin.
Present.
The Honorable Alex Heath.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, they're all present.
Okay, thank you so much. At this time, we'll go to our first agenda item, electric cities. Mr. City Administrator, you want to introduce that?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We are fortunate to have with us today Mr. Walter West, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Electric Cities of Georgia, commonly referred to as ECG. ECG is a very valuable resource for, I believe, about 52 cities that provide utilities across the state and provide a lot of wonderful resources. I'll stop right there because he can introduce himself better than I can. We're pleased to have Mr. West with us today. If you could, please.
Mr. Phillips, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Walter West, and Electric Cities of Georgia is really an extension of the city. We do a whole host of services, probably too many to get into, but I'll touch on them in this presentation. So what is the best way to, there you go. All right, so I have the absolute privilege of talking about something that's so fun, electric rates, right? You can't see electricity. All you can see is the output of electricity, like the lights. So Mr. Phillips asked me to keep this high level, keep it interesting, which is going to be very challenging, but I'll do my best. So when we talk, before I even go into that, I want to congratulate the city of Fairburn. I don't even know if the city manager knows this yet, but last week, the electric department won the Jeff Cook Safety Award, the silver level. And that safety award, that's a very good thing. That award looks at, yes, thank you.
Oh, right.
So
Before you go,
look at is procedures.
Sir, before you go on, if you don't mind, since you brought it up, would you bring that would you bring that plaque?
So,
I was gonna-
thank you, Mr. West jumped a little ahead of us.
Yeah.
I am so sorry. I didn't
No,
mean to
you're
do
fine.
that.
We're excited about this. I just wanted to give you a brief context.
Okay.
Oftentimes, we don't acknowledge enough the essential nature of what a lot of our city staff does. And that's no truer than in our utilities department. The reality is that in the last 4 months, 2 linemen have lost their lives in the state of Georgia doing the work that our staff does every day. And so it's important, and safety is always paramount, but it couldn't be more important than what they do. They're working with high voltage wires. This particular award, the Jeff Cook Award, is administered by ECG, but it looks at some very specific criteria. Things like management participation, employee procedures, training and education, regularly documented safety meetings, rescue training, accident investigations. So it's not just a nice thing they do. They actually look at our department to determine whether or not they are doing safety the right way. This award means something. I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Martin, all the men and women in our electricity department. They are doing work that keeps our employees safe in a very dangerous job. So I'm very proud of them.
All right, all right, all right. Love it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. And the city department scored an 88 out of 100. So again, congratulations. What I'd like to say is, you know, if most of us make a mistake, you really hit the backup on the keyboard, right? These guys get injured or worse. So safety is extremely important. So I didn't mean to jump the gun, Mr. All right, and then so for electric rates, complicated subject, but I'm keeping it on a high level. So when you look at electric rates, it's really just all your costs that you have, the bill you get from MEAG, right? And the local city budget to help run the department, right? You look at that cost divided by what kilowatt hours your customers use, right? So you have a good idea what you cost. You never know how many kilowatt hours your customer is going to use. You can't predict the weather. You can't predict the economy. So high level, we're going to dig into a little detail. However, more detail is coming in at the work session, and I mean the retreat in about a month. So, all right, so just here's a visual to frame this up. And I have a pointer, but obviously I can't point to the screen above my head. So you see the numbers, the red circles, you have a number 1, which is the electric generating, the power plant. The 2 is a transmission system. You get to number 3, that's the distribution plant. So what really MEAG does for you, not ECG, but MEAG, they have the generation and the transmission. That's where the power is produced and transmitted to 2 substations that are located in Fairburn. And then you have all your customers that serve power. So MEAG handles all the way to those substations, and then the city handles from those substations out to all your customers. So when we talk about cost, you have your MEAG cost and you have your city cost. Here's just a high-level point to make. When we talk about an asset like electric distribution system, I'll pick a car just to be the analogy. So typically you have, you have like a mortgage on the car. Actually, I guess it's a payment on the car. The way these cars are priced now, it's almost a mortgage. And then you have maintenance. Maintenance is real key here because a lot of what goes on with the distribution system, a lot of folks can ride by and not notice any issues with it. But, just like the oil in your car, if you don't change the oil in your car, you know what happens. You're going to replace the motor. So, obviously, the way I like to frame this is for maintenance for a distribution system, it's pay now or pay more later. Just like I tell my son who just started driving, I'll pay for the cost to change the oil. You burn the motor up, you're paying for that. So, pay more later or pay less now. All right, so the purpose, one of the fundamental purposes of the electric department, it really, if you look at that red arrow in the middle, it makes a contribution to the general fund to help lessen the burden of taxes to the citizens. So if you look towards your left and you see that hexagon, that orange hexagon, we're showing an enterprise fund, but let's call it electricity. That's your electric department. You have electric rates that come into that. You have your deposits, which really isn't a revenue, that's an asset, but you have your fees like phone and cable pay to be on the poles. You have all these costs that come together, and your goal is to make 11% more than your cost to transfer that to the general fund to reduce the burden of taxes. That helps the whole community so your economic and community development, your downtown thrives, and that sort of thing. All right, so I will not go into every word on this page, but those operations that you have for the electric department, there's a budget that goes around those operations, and that budgeted cost goes into those rates. So we'll do a little deeper dive on that, but if you're looking just under operations, there's generation planning. And this is kind of what you guys kind of talk to MEAG about. So this is a little boring slide, but it's important. So you got the two bars, and this is the generation that you own through MEAG. So on the left-hand side, it's really referring to capacity. That is your capacity to serve kilowatt hours. So you have generation capacity, that's to serve, let's call this building. If you go turn the lights off, you're not using any electricity for that, but you still have to have that generation to do it. So generation is how much ability you have. The kilowatt hours on the right-hand side are how much your customers are operating. So what you take away from that is that bar on the left is how much you need in capacity. That orange part at the top is what you have to buy off the market. The rest of that is what you own. And then on the right-hand side, it's the same, but it's the energy piece. Now, what you've probably I'm only showing this from the standpoint of you'll have a decision to make coming up. It's really kind of a MEAG decision is how much energy do you want to help purchase to try to lock in some of those market prices. But I'm just showing you that because I'm in front of you. It's a very important point, and that does go into your cost of electricity, though. All right, so when we talk about maintenance, you really can't see things that are going wrong. You can't look at a car and tell if the oil's been changed or not, right? So just like a pole, you look on the left-hand side, the pole rots typically below the surface of the ground. So you have to dig around it to find out if it's really rotting or not. If you look at the one in the middle, you can see where the pole is splintering at the top. It may not look like a big issue if you're not paying attention to it, but folks like Mr. Martin look at those kind of things. And then you look at the pad-mounted transformer. That door is open on that transformer, but ants love transformers. They'll get in there and they'll eat stuff, and you can see that. You open the door, and look how much you can see where the fire ants have done what they do. Yeah. So if you don't pay attention to those sort of things, it causes big problems, just like the oil example in the car. All right, so this is where it gets fun. So when you're looking at electric rates, your revenue has to equal what your cost is, right? Otherwise, you're not making enough money to collect your costs, pay your bills, and transfer money to the general fund. So when we look at those upper circles, you got your MEAG cost, which includes the SEPA, they call it, the hydro. You've got your local distribution budget. You want to make sure you have reserves, and that those reserves are what help set your credit rating. And then you want to make a transfer to the general fund. All those are cost. So those costs have to equal the revenue. And those revenue, obviously, is what the electric rates recover. I won't bore you with this one, but this is basically saying if you've got more than 3 months of reserves on hand, you got an A rating. So, all right. So once you determine what your cost is, which is those circles that we just showed, they go into a cost of service study, and then those costs go into those rates. So I like this slide much better than that slide. So once you have your cost, if you look at that middle section on that slide, you have in that middle section, you have 3 different columns. The first one says, okay, you've got your cost of generation, which is production, transmission, and you got your local cost. Once you have all those costs, you put them into 3 different buckets. You put in how much does it cost to read a customer's meter. And it may sound like it's just a meter, but no, you've got meter readers or the technology to read the meters. You've got, the financial folks in the building to help, send the bills out. You got collections, you got all that sort of stuff. So you've got the cost of having the customer. Then you have your consumption piece, which is, when these lights are on. Then you have your capacity piece, which is your fix. So you get those 3 buckets. Once you have all that, then you've got to put those into each one of those rates. You have a residential rate. You have commercial rates that are small, medium, and large. You have industrial. You have, all sorts of rates. So all that has to weigh in. You're dividing that cost into a matrix, and it goes out to the rates. And at the end of the day, what you're charging those customers needs to equal the revenue that you need to pay all those bills we just mentioned. So what typically happens is this bar graph is kind of looking at those customers we were just talking about. This is not you. This is just a sample of what happens and what to be aware of. So each one of those bars represents a percentage. It's a percentage margin on customers. So if you look at the far left, that's just the first bar is what your total margin is. In this case, it's 4%, which I would tell you 4% is not enough margin to make because these franchise taxes are 4%. So you need to be closer to the 10 to 12%. Residential, when you look at a full cost of service study for this particular city, and it happens a lot with cities, they don't charge your residential customers enough to recover cost, which can be a challenge. Because what happens then is you've got to get all that other cost across those other customers. And typically those other customers, the commercial customers that don't use a lot of kilowatt hours, ones that are typically downtown and that sort of thing, they're open from 8 to 5 or something like that, so they don't use a lot. Your fast food and that sort of stuff would require a little bit more. So you can see how that would look, and when we get to the retreat in a month, we'll have specific numbers on what your city looks like. So what's important to look at here is, most of your revenue is coming from those rates. I would say, more than 95%. So the rates are the biggest factor that you have to get right. And point to make is that, with residential customers, you want to recover your cost. You don't want to subsidize by your commercial industrial. Your commercial customers, since they have a short window of a high demand, they would typically require a larger percentage margin. Industrials are typically lower because they're operating around the clock and they use a ton of kilowatt hours. And customer choice is a different topic altogether, so we'll talk about that another day. So objectives, rates need to recover cost. You don't want to recover too much because then you're not competitive. And then also when we get back with you in a month, we'll show you how the new recommendations compare to your neighboring utilities. The last point I think I want to make is that, and this is an ongoing process, you don't want to go more than about 3 years without looking at this study and getting your electric rates done. So, and think that's about it. So I think I made the 10-minute window, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does any member of council have any question about the presentation that has been given?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
You or Mr. Phillips, when is the last time the city of Fairburn, one, did an evaluation of our rates, two, and actually modified them based on the study?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question, Councilwoman Portis-Jones. I do not know when the last rate study was performed. We are currently in the midst of a rate study through EC&G. That's what Mr. West was referring to. That will be completed within the next 30 days. So we will have a current rate study when we go to our retreat that you can look at in detail. The last time the rates were adjusted was approximately a decade ago, roughly 10 years ago. So that was the last rate adjustment. So I don't know in the interim if there were any studies between that time, but the rates have remained consistent for the last 10 years.
Thank you.
Zeke, go ahead.
Georgia Power, I know that they bought in per se toward the end of the build on 3 and 4, level 3 and 4. And has that had any effect on the amount of available wattage or anything?
You're still getting the same megawatts that you had planned to get out of those generators 3 and 4.
Got it.
Yeah.
And
There's no reduction in that output that you're taking.
And so has that affected in any way the cost of producing?
Yeah, I mean, that's more of a MEAG question, and that's getting updated every month now. So if that gets pushed back, MEAG will update that cost.
Okay.
And we'll get those numbers and help put them into the rate. So I guess just to kind of identify who Electric Cities of Georgia is and who MEAG is, we were one company up until about 2009.
Okay.
But what MEAG does is generation and transmission only. We're kind of the service arm of the cities. We both have the same customers, but we do completely different things. So they'll produce the numbers. We're kind of the calculator behind those numbers.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, sir.
sure, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Just for some clarity, so within 30 days, we will find out if rates are going up, staying the same, going down?
We'll have a good evaluation of what that looks like.
Right, so all of those cost factors that Walter just went over will be a part of the rate study. I think, if I remember the slide correctly, the goal with utilities is to, one, cover your expenses, right? For the enterprise fund to contribute to the general fund, typically around 11% each year.
That's the average. I mean, but
Average.
yours, you'll know what yours is.
Because that then helps to lower the tax burden across the city. That's the basic model. What this rate study will do will let us know where we are in that process. Are we covering our expenses? It's been 10 years. So
I heard
I'll
that.
stop there.
Yeah.
I will tell you that costs are very different today than they were in 2013. And so, but we don't want to make any assumptions. We wanted to have ECG do a expertise rate study.
Right.
And that's what we will have within the next 30 days. And that will inform our discussion moving forward as to where are we as it relates to utilities. Based on some other information that I've seen, I think there is definitely a conversation that you as elected officials and we as staff will need to have so that you can decide how the city should move forward in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a background, I mean, it's an extensive study because, what your customers use obviously plays a huge role in what the cost is, right? So I think we've already got this, but we've got 24 months, so 2 years worth of every customer's bill. The names have been not on there, but we will recalculate every bill to make sure that the billing system is calculating the rates correctly. So we'll look for every nuance that may have an inefficiency in it. We'll look at all the cost. MEAG's constantly, your biggest cost is the MEAG cost. So we'll look at that. They'll project that out over the next few years, and we'll have a study done on that. So it'll be quite extensive.
Let me ask you a question. I'm almost sure, and I apologize, I wish I thought about it before today. A little over a year ago, I'm almost sure I read somewhere where Georgia Power were saying they were going to do a rate increase, I want to say for 3 or 4 straight years. And the reason it hit my mind is because I was actually running for office and I was thinking about, boy, that's going that's gonna pay we got our own, and because we have our own utility company, even though we buy it in bulk, that cost is ultimately passed down to everyone else. I remember, like I said, it just came back to me just now. I remember, I can't figure out what the reason for why they were talking about a annual increase.
Right, so they've got Vogel 3 and 4 coming online. They've also got a lot of fuel costs they're bringing in. My understanding is they're looking for, I shouldn't say anything I shouldn't be quoted, but they're looking for a pretty sizable piece just for their fuel cost adjustment.
Correct.
Over $1 billion.
I remember that.
So they're looking at all these costs. And I will say this, the rates are almost a contact sport these days because, I mean, everything is changing. I don't know if you gave them an update of what happened on just before Christmas, so like December 23rd. But the wholesale cost, so that little orange section I showed you in that bar graph, that was 1,000 times what the average kilowatt hour cost for the year. It was a very short period. It's a very small occurrence, but MEAG looked at that, and we got together and said, look, you got to give options to the cities to help hedge that. So they're coming out. I mean, we're in the spring time of the year, and that's when the costs are typically lowest. But they're coming out to the cities saying, look, think about that little orange part you saw on those graphs. So that's why I took this opportunity to do that. So over the past several years, the orange part of that graph you were buying was dirt cheap. So maybe didn't need a rate increase. So, but with this information, you'll have a dashboard and say, yeah, we'll have a recommendation on what to do.
And just for the members of council and the public that's watching, one of the reasons, again, in this case, that we bring ECG and some of the other organizations, at the end of the day, a lot of our residents forget your city government is a business, okay? So you have to run it like a business. And so costs can't continue to go up, and you don't address it at some point. Again, you mentioned the 2012, actually, the former city manager, Tom Barber, and I remember having a conversation, and that was one of the things that he talked about in his initial assessment when he got here in 2011, that, Mayor, the government will have to eventually address this area, and him being a CPA, so you can imagine what his perspective was. So, but I just want, again, we bring this information, not to scare the residents, but we have to be real. We have to be realistic and run our government like a business. So, go ahead, sir. Then I'll come to Ms. Davis.
Mayor, in a story dated December 20th, the Georgia Public Service Commission approved a $1.8 billion Georgia Power rate increase over 3 years.
Can you speak in the mic? I'm sorry, I can't.
That was December 20th.
I'm sorry, can you speak in the mic? I can hear you.
The Georgia Public Service Commission approved a $1.8 billion Georgia Power rate increase on December 20th, raising rates by 12% over 3 years. And so that is not directly correlate to rates in Fairburn, but it's just an example of the market in general.
Yep.
If you look at the Consumer Price Index, or if you just put all of that aside, all of us know we're in an inflationary economy. Mm-hmm. There's literally nothing that doesn't cost more today than it did 3 years ago. And so that's the calculation that this rate study will help us to focus on. I can tell you, looking at some of the numbers from our current budget, from the previous budget last year, yes, we definitely have some issues we have to address as it relates to what we pay for utilities versus what we charge. There's a definite conversation that we need to have there. And it's part of just sound fiscal management. As we look forward in the city and talk about the things the city aspires to do, those are factors that are taken into consideration. And so it's just something we need to look at. It is not a crisis, so I want to be very clear about that. But it is something that we have to have a very specific conversation about to determine what the elected officials feel is the best way for us to move forward.
Ms. Davis?
Well, I think,
I'm sorry.
I just want to, so could you, for the past 10 years, could you provide us at our retreat the transfer to the general fund and that due to the revenue that was generated from the electric and calculate what the property tax impact would have been if we had not been able to do the transfer? for example, and I don't know if this number is still current or correct, but when I came on council, I believe it was $1 million that we were transferring from the enterprise funds, and I don't know if that was electric only or electric and water. I don't know. But whatever that number is, it was being transferred into the general fund so that we could hold in any increase in property taxes so that we could meet the budget obligation. So I'm asking for those numbers for the past 10 years and what the property tax impact would have been if we were not able to do that. Secondly, could you talk a little bit about where MEAG and ECG, the discussions you guys are having relative to solar or renewable energies, and how that might potentially affect our rate increases or our ability to deliver electricity at a more affordable cost level.
Sure, I can. I know, and I know this because we helped work with, this project was actually extended to Walmart. So MEAG currently has an 80 megawatt solar project that the city signed up for. And I wish I'd known that question ahead of time. I could have found out how much, if.
You can bring it to us at the retreat.
Absolutely, right.
Thank you.
So I don't know if Fairburn's part of that project or not, but we worked with Walmart on behalf of 14 of the 23 cities that signed up for that 80 megawatt project. So when you think about 80 megawatts, total MEAG system is about 2,500 megawatts, so it would be a small piece. That project was supposed to get started, be up and running by the end of December 24. We were meeting with MEAG today because we have the relationship with Walmart where those costs are kind of rising a little bit, so we have to.
Well, if not by when we meet in a month, if at some point, if you can let us know what we as a city could do, what things that we can put in place, opportunities there are, or some things that we need to do to plan for what will be inevitable relative to renewable energy.
Absolutely, and
Okay.
yeah, that is an option, and we'll bring more information.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis
Yes,
and then Mr. Whitmore.
Yes, I want to, in reference to this, and we all know we're in an environment where everything is going up because cost of goods, operations, a lot of stuff impact that. But one of the things I want to thank our administration for is putting that weatherization information on our website. That is a tool we can use for our citizens. And I ask that we do a forum on it so we can educate our citizens about the weatherization, because if their homes are tight and there are no air getting in and getting out, that will reduce consumption. So one way to mitigate a possibility of an increase is to mitigate the usage. And so I really thank you for letting our citizens know about that, but we got to do more than just putting it on the website. We've got to really actively let them know what it's about. And that's been around for about like 2 years, and you know, I couldn't get it to the point for it to be sent out to our citizens. But now that you have done that, and I really appreciate that, we need to let them know about it, because their homes can be weatherized with no cost to them if they meet the guidelines. And that is very important that we jump on that now. Thank you.
Mr. Heath, I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore, excuse me.
Thank you. Sir, I think, for clarity's sake, I believe you said you had 2 years of data for our residents, electric bills, is that correct?
We should have gotten that, yeah, I think we got that back in February, yes.
So, with that data, I know there has been some concerns with billing. Yes. Whereas some people had higher usage, and then when they came in and challenged it, we found out that there were some other issues. And we were working to correct that. So my question would be, based on your 2 years of data, what matrix will you be using to equalize that out so that when we look at those numbers, we'll be able to make a more informed decision based on the recommendations?
Right. So to be clear, what we do is we get the data. So we get the month it was, the consumption, if there was a demand charge, that sort of thing, and the amount that was charged. We take that data in Excel and basically recalculate everything and compare it to what the bill was. So you need that information because those are the kilowatt hours you're dividing your cost by. So that's what we'll do. We'll come to you and say, okay, if you're underbilling, then that would mean, and you weren't making enough money before, you would know if you fix the billing, you don't need to raise the rates, right? So we'll have all that data to be able to show.
Okay, and my other question would be, you talked about the solar farm. Has that farm been identified location-wise?
Yes, the county escapes me, but it's in the southern part of the state, so. And it gets the best economics there. So what's unique in Georgia, wherever you locate it, it doesn't matter to you if it was located here. Are the economics here for the sunlight here better than South Georgia because those transmission costs are homogenized in Georgia?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Did you have a question, sir?
No, he asked the exact same thing, because I remember there was a period of time where bills were higher than they were actually being. So that was my question as well, with the 2 years of data, will we be having the accurate data? But you just explained that.
Right, so we'll calculate the bill based on the kilowatt hours that's provided. We're not taking those kilowatt hours and going back to that home and saying, do these meter readings match up, right? We're just taking the data that we have and then comparing that to what was billed.
Yes.
Sir?
One last question from me. Do you know if, and this may be a MEAG question that I need to be asking, do you know if MEAG has any more coal-fired plants?
It's more of there's coal plants there. What their intent is, that's a MEAG question.
Is to do away with coal?
That question of if I think it's if plant share is coming offline, that's a conversation that MEAG will have with you.
Okay. And one part goes with that. Coal supply in the United States, are you familiar with how many years of supply that we do have of coal?
Yeah, no, that's more of a power supply question. I don't have that fuel source information.
I know I attended last year's MEAG meeting,
Right.
and it seems like they said it was between 3 and 5 years of coal left in the United States. So that was a big concern of mine also.
Yeah, that's going to be a MEAG question as far as what that supply is and how much of that needs to be in your fleet of generation resources. And MEAG looks at that from an economic standpoint too. They look at what type of taxes are going to be on those sources of fuel and how can that generator operate compared to nuclear and gas and solar and that sort of thing.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
And
Mayor, just one,
Let me come to him, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Jones.
I was just going to mention, at the council's pleasure, we can bring back Stuart Jones, who's been before the council previously from MEAG, and he can more directly answer those questions as it relates to Vogel, the coal-fired plants. As Mr. West is mentioning, all those are really MEAG questions.
Exactly.
We do have a Stuart Jones who works very closely with the cities in our area from MEAG, and so we can certainly bring him back to answer some of those questions.
Okay. Ms. Jones?
I just want to ask and add, in terms of data provided to us, if you'll also include the annual reserves for that we set aside for electricity for the past 10 years as well.
I don't want to get too much. Yes, ma'am, we will have that. That's a central part of the retreat.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Any other questions, members of council? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Next presenter.
The next item is facility condition assessment presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So, as you know, Mayor and Council approved the RFP for the facility condition assessment last year. Subsequent to that, we also got it awarded to Bureau Veritas to complete the assessments. They completed those assessments January, February, the on-site physical assessments. This presentation goes over their findings. This is an overview of their findings. The details of the findings can be quite extensive. We know that the details will go over in great depth at the retreat, but we wanted to present the overview of what the findings were leading into that conversation. And I will say that due to some logistical issues that they had, one of their representatives couldn't be here tonight, but they are prepared to further conversations, answer any questions that we have, but they had some logistical issues on their end. So just wanted to say that for the record. They have been a great partner to work with thus far. So the agenda that we'll go through is just introduction to kind of Bureau Veritas, what they do, who they are a little bit, the scope of the work of their particular contract, their key findings, summary of the data, then of course, questions and answers. So some background on Bureau Veritas. They are an international company that do these types of facility assessments and engineering and consulting around the world. Previously, when working with Atlas, some of my colleagues knew them from Europe. But here in North America, as you see from the chart, they have done over $150 million worth of revenue. They have almost 1,000 employees. They have done over 50,000 projects. They have studied over $10 billion of facility assets in over 40 states. With some of the key categories you see below in terms of maintenance, industrial, housing, accessibility, MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing components. You'll see acronyms. I'll try to say them, but construction ME just does acronyms very quickly. So the physical needs assessment is what we asked for our city. Basically, how the project went, this is just an overview, is the setup, a kickoff meeting which we had. We provided them a site list as we discussed. They got building information from us as much as we could provide, including drawings, some survey information. Then began the next phase where they actually came out to do the physical inspections, categorizing of assets, providing information about cost and replacement, maintenance plans, et cetera. And then they started delivering draft reports, final reports, and we do have a database, a online cloud-based database with all of the information and all of their findings that is accessible to the city permanently anytime we want to. So I have access to that database. I've shared it with my team so we can look at the information anytime we want to. It also allows us to manipulate the information, so as we replace components and do changes, we can change it in the database and it will reflect that. This slide just talks about that there's some of the technology that they used, which is a mobile data collection, basically iPads and tablets they walk around with, logging information, taking pictures, putting it right into their database, into their software right while they're on site. I and a couple of my staff was along with them for all of their inspections, and I can tell you that they spend a couple of hours at every building walking around, looking at everything they can possibly find, and it's automatically in their system. So it makes it very easy to have a conversation and for them to update information. This next slide just talks about some of the language that you'll see in the reports. You'll see the term EUL, which is estimated useful life, and then you'll see a term or acronym RUL, which is remaining useful life. In the rating system for different components. This example shows a roof. So with that type of flat roof right there, estimated useful life is 20 years. So in their rating system for different components in their findings, they will attribute points to that based on the conditions. As you see, excellent, good being it's got most of the useful life left. fair being, it's got, 12 to 13, like half left, poor being maybe a couple, and failed is just, it needs to be immediately replaced. These next slides kind of give you a diagram of the different areas that they look at when they're doing their assessments. I know leading up to their assessments, Mayor and Council had questions or wanted to make sure that they looked at all the components in the adjacent facade of the building. So on the site and infrastructure, you see that they addressed the parking lot, the flat work, as we call it, the landscaping, the topography, the utilities that they can see. They try to inspect that, take a look at that, and give a recommendation. Next is the exterior of the building in the envelope, or we call it the building envelope. So that's your exterior walls, your windows, doorways, balconies, all of that. Columns are included in the exterior building envelope. Basically, the skin of the building is also, we call that. Then next is your rooftop and roof systems, which is pretty explanatory, but this will include canopies and skylights as well. And importantly, the interiors. That's what affects people most directly, what people see a lot of times, because we spend most of our times on the inside of the buildings. So clearly, obviously, that was part of their assessment. So that's the walls, the floors, the lighting, anything that's on the interior, minus this page, which is the mechanical, electrical systems. So any water heater, HVAC unit, toilet, sink, those are included in the mechanical and electrical systems as that category. So this next chart shows an overview for the 10-year total. They will see in the succeeding charts after this, broken down into several year time frames. But this chart also gives a description of the recommended fix, repair, or issue, breaking it from safety, performance or integrity, accessibility, environmental, retrofit or adaptation, and then life cycle or renewal. And that is the priority of how you would attack it from a system and a building approach. Safety and life safety being first, being primary, performance and integrity of the building and the systems and its components, then accessibility, including ADA, then any sort of environmental, water quality, air quality, then retrofit, then life cycle. Environmental is fourth. I know you may think it should be first, but any environmental issue that is up to the point of life safety would be life safety, not environmental. So just want to clarify that. It's no longer environmental, it's life safety. The chart to the left shows the 10-year total for repairs, renewals, everything that you see to those descriptions on the right. The 10-year total that they're estimating, and these are estimates, including inflation, is $11.5 million. In the breakdown, as you can see right there in the middle, is what's for safety, what's for performance, what's accessibility, what's retrofit and adaptation, and what's life cycle and renewal. Life cycle and renewal just means that that's the normal process of a building. We anticipate to replace these items. Everybody would. The roof every 20 years, your flooring in a life cycle period. This next page is a summary in the overview of the expenditure forecast for the city for the next 20 years. The first column is the immediate column. This represents, when they say immediate, things that they immediately identified needed to be fixed at that time, which was 2022 when they got started. And then 2023 and 2024 are in the short-term 1 to 2 year columns. And by their assessment, it's calendar year, not our fiscal year. So to translate, 2023 items would be things I should be fixing right now. And 2024 items should be things that we'll talk about for FY 2024, would be all in that second column. And then from there, you go into the 3 to 5 year, the 6 to 10 year, and the 11 to 12 year, and then you get your total at the end of what we consider to be recommended fixes, immediate problems, and then things that turn into life cycle, renewal and adaptation projects. This next slide shows immediate need by location. So based on the assessment, they gave us a total of items and the cost for the immediate needs. And again, most of these immediate needs are life safety and performance and integrity. So, for example, I know one of the immediate needs for City Hall is a roof. There are pictures associated with all of the buildings. We didn't include all of these because these reports are massive. They're about 60 to 80 or 100 pages per building with pictures and whatnot. So I would be glad to share that with you all and have as much fun reading them as I did. It was very informative, and I tried to summarize that for city administration, not to bore them or give them sticker shock. But that's just one of the fixes that we know about. And again, of course, the staff can provide those details. But these are the immediate needs that we know about. And as you can see, the largest needs are at the educational campus. But in context, that's because the educational campus has more buildings in one place than any other campus that we have. It literally has right now 6 buildings that are active. Well, 6 buildings that are present. Even though one is not active, we still categorize the needs based on what was seen there. This next slide just shows a sample of what the observation details on the report looks like. So what I was seeing and what you see when you look at the reports, you'll get to the observation details, and it'll show a picture, the location, it'll give you information about the building, the location, the component that you're looking at, the square foot of the building, the unit costs per square foot that we are assuming per the nominal rates right now. For information, that picture is the picture of the municipal court building right there at the employee parking lot. That is of that roof right there. Those trees are no longer there because they have been cut back, but that condition still exists. And we have done some small repairs to that roof, but this is just an example of what you would see in the observation report. I'm sorry. This next slide is the facility condition index slide. It basically is an index in the industry that equates to the needs or replacement costs and conditions of a building. If you see in the top right, there's another range of scale that shows the conditions of well condition, it's in good, subject to repair replacement, needs immediate repair replacement because it's been subject to hard or long-term wear use. And the last one there's in pink is that it's reached its full usefulness and serviceability. And as you get to the darker shade is the more the immediate need to it to be repaired. And to no surprise, I'll just highlight that the police headquarters shows up in very bright pink colors across the board. But you can see that we have some facilities that currently are doing okay, but many as you get to the 3 and 5 year mark that need some attention. I will say that it's not uncommon for buildings to need attention because you do regular maintenance, but it should be a point to see that we don't want to continue to be in the orange and pink in 5 to 10 years for every facility that we have. This is the 10-year summary. It is another breakdown of the numbers that we discussed earlier, and it gives you year by year for the next 10 years what the estimated total cost of repairs, maintenance to these, and even renovations to these buildings would need to be. So as you can see, the immediate needs are high, but that's also 2023 includes everything that should have been done in 2022 up until now, and then going forward, what those are. And as you can see, the numbers begin to level off as you get further down because they're anticipating that you would have done the fixes and done those projects in those first years. But if you don't, then those numbers, of course, would escalate. And this is a 10-year example detail. Again, they use City Hall, so this would be a detailing report showing what the component is, what the subtotal is per that particular item or project, and when the year that it should be repaired based on their assessment. This is the type of information that my team would use for us to fix things in-house and/or contract worked out. Again, these are estimated costs based off of the current market values and current market pricing that they have. So no vendors have given definite quotes for this at this time. And inflation is included in these longer-term numbers. And then just this last slide is just definitions of some of the things that we've already said and I've already explained. So now, if you have any questions.
This is a point of clarity for me. On the slide where you show the excellent, good, fair, poor, and I just want to make sure when it's used the RUL,
Yes, sir.
rest of the useful life. I was just to make, am I clear with that 12 to 3 indicating that I'm trying to make sure I'm clear what, I know what a useful life means. Could you explain that one more time, what the RUL and what that means? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Sure. So RUL is the remaining useful life. So when it says
Remaining useful.
12 to 13 years, that means how much estimated useful life it has left.
Gotcha.
So we think it maybe have 12 to 3 years left, somewhere in that range, depending on the component.
Gotcha.
Is that with ongoing maintenance or without doing anything?
That's in its current condition.
Current condition, okay.
Just in the current condition as they saw it right then, this is how much estimated life, useful life we think it has left right now today.
Okay, gotcha. And the other question I had on the slide, where you showed the safety performance cost by type with the circle.
Yes, sir.
Even though it's a small percentage in the red, based on what it says, unsafe conditions, I'm assuming those are actually being addressed without saying what they are.
Yes, sir.
Being addressed as we speak.
Yeah, we didn't wait to address those. We're trying to address those actively now. Yes.
Okay. Any member of council got a question?
I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Davis.
Yes. I'm looking at slide page 33, immediate needs, and you list all the facilities. I want to ask some questions in reference to the Fairburn Education Center, GMC campus, and particularly to the vacant building that we have, the 3-story vacant building.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what are the major concerns in that building?
The vacant shell building does represent those costs that you see for immediate needs. Right now, it's what we call a shell building, meaning that the exterior was done and the core components were put in terms of they have a plumbing line, they put a HVAC system on the roof, but it still needs to be brought up to be operational and life safety. So all the interior needs to be built out, including the drywall of the rooms, the bathrooms need to be built out with fixtures, toilets, lights, paint, flooring needs to be done. We need to do the diffusers for the HVAC equipment, the sprinkler heads need to be dropped. The doors need to have locks on them and needs to be installed with that. That's typically what the overview of what needs to happen with that building.
Okay. Is there a water pipe going into the building for toilets and stuff like that?
There is a water pipe going into the building. There is a sprinkler system and domestic water to that building that we've seen. We do need to very much like to test that, but we would want to get a contractor, engineers involved to test that since it's just been sitting there vacant for so long.
Yeah, because that was a concern when we rented that building, that there was no actual water feeding into the building. So that's what I wanted to check on that. And I have another question. On page 35, where we are identifying replacement value for all of the facilities listed, this is just me. I looked at everything, and I think in every facility or department that could be in a new city hall, and I added up the replacement values that's listed on here, and I come to like $43 million. So I'm wondering, how do we weigh repairing this? And we are so, you know, disjointed with departments over here and departments over there. And the amount of money that's going to be used to bring this to where it should be, like $253,000.
So.
Yeah, help me out.
Yes, ma'am. What I would tell you, Mayor Pro Tem, is I don't want to continue to refer to the retreat because I'm making it sound like we'll be there for a week. It'll be the same length as last year. I can tell you that this presentation is specific to the facility assessment. There is an ongoing conversation that staff is already deeply engaged in as to what recommendations should we bring forward for council to consider about how we address those issues. And there are several other elements in there. Your observation is very astute, and we've looked at similar dynamics. So we're working on putting together some recommendations that you as elected officials can dive into in depth at the retreat. We've got a significant fiscal discussion to have, as we talked about previously, Councilwoman Portis Jones, and a facility discussion as well. Those two are connected, as you might imagine,
Yeah.
right? And so this is one specific and key element of that discussion, but we are already formulating other recommendations to bring forward to mayor and council.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Any other member of council? Seeing none, we'll start our meeting at 7 o'clock in 5 minutes.